The sun beat down mercilessly on the endless prairie as Samuel Hayes followed his cattle across the vast grassland. It was the summer of 1883, and drought had turned the normally green plains into a sea of golden brown. His border collie, Rex, trotted alongside him, tongue hanging out from the heat. Samuel had been a rancher for 8 years now, ever since he'd claimed this land after his service in the cavalry ended. At 32, he was weathered by the harsh frontier life, his face bronzed by sun and wind. Most folks in the nearby town of Cedar Ridge thought him a confirmed bachelor, too set in his solitary ways to ever take a wife. On this particular afternoon, Rex suddenly stopped and began barking frantically. The dog's ears were pricked forward, his body rigid with alertness. Samuel squinted in the direction Rex was looking, but saw nothing except the shimmering heat waves rising from the prairie floor. "What is it, boy?" Samuel called, but Rex was already running ahead, his barks echoing across the empty landscape. Samuel spurred his horse forward, following the collie through the tall grass. As they crested a small rise, he saw what had caught Rex's attention. There, in a shallow depression near a dried creek bed, lay a figure partially hidden by the sparse shade of a stunted cottonwood tree. Drawing closer, Samuel's breath caught in his throat. It was a young Native American woman, her long black hair spread around her like a dark halo. Her buckskin dress was torn and stained with dust and what looked like dried blood. She lay so still that for a moment Samuel feared she was dead. Rex approached cautiously, whimpering softly as he sniffed the air around the motionless figure. Samuel dismounted and knelt beside her, his hand hovering uncertainly over her shoulder. Her skin was burning with fever, her lips cracked and dry from dehydration. "Miss?" he said softly, then repeated it louder. "Miss, can you hear me?" The woman's eyelids fluttered, and for just a moment, dark eyes opened to look at him with a mixture of fear and confusion. She tried to speak, but only a hoarse whisper emerged. Samuel couldn't understand the words, but he recognized the Apache language from his cavalry days. Without hesitation, he scooped her up in his arms, surprised by how light she felt. Rex circled them anxiously as Samuel carried her to his horse. Getting her onto the saddle while she was unconscious proved challenging, but eventually he managed to secure her in front of him, her head resting against his chest. The ride back to his ranch house seemed to take forever. The woman drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes muttering words in Apache that Samuel didn't understand. Her fever was getting worse, and he could feel the heat radiating from her skin through her clothes. Rex ran ahead as they approached the small log cabin that Samuel called home. It wasn't much to look at, just 2 rooms with a covered porch, but it was sturdy and well built. Samuel had constructed it himself with logs he'd hauled from the distant mountains. Inside, Samuel laid the woman on his own bed, the only one in the house. He'd been sleeping on a bedroll on the kitchen floor ever since he'd built the place, never seeing the need for fancy furniture when it was just him and Rex. He fetched water from the well outside and began the careful process of cleaning the woman's wounds. There were several cuts on her arms and legs and a particularly nasty gash on her forehead that had bled considerably. None of them appeared to be life-threatening, but combined with her fever and obvious dehydration, they painted a picture of someone who had been through a terrible ordeal. As he worked, Samuel found himself studying her face. She was beautiful, with high cheekbones and full lips, her features both strong and delicate. She looked to be in her early 20s, though it was hard to tell with the toll her recent suffering had taken. Rex stationed himself by the bed, as if he'd appointed himself the woman's guardian. Every few minutes he would whine softly and look up at Samuel with concerned eyes, as if asking what else they could do to help. Samuel had some basic medical supplies left over from his army days, and he used them to clean and bandage her wounds. He managed to get a little water between her lips, though most of it ran down her chin. The fever showed no signs of breaking, and he began to worry that she might not survive the night. As darkness fell, Samuel lit an oil lamp and settled into a chair beside the bed. He'd sent word to town earlier with a passing cowboy, asking Doc Peterson to come out when he could, but it would be at least a day before the old doctor could make the journey. The woman's breathing was shallow and rapid, her skin pale beneath its natural bronze color. Samuel had seen men die from fever during the war, and he recognized the signs. All he could do now was wait and hope that whatever strength had brought her this far would carry her through. Rex curled up on the floor beside the bed, his ears still alert for any change in their unexpected guest's condition. Samuel found himself wondering who she was, where she had come from, and what had happened to leave her alone and injured on the vast prairie. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows of the small cabin. Samuel pulled a blanket over the woman and settled in for what he knew would be a long night of watching and waiting. In all his years of solitary living, he had never felt such a strong compulsion to save someone's life. The woman stirred slightly, mumbling something in her native tongue. Samuel leaned forward, wishing he could understand, wishing he could offer some comfort beyond the basic care he was providing. All he could do was keep vigil and pray that morning would bring some improvement in her condition. Dawn broke with a soft golden light filtering through the cabin windows, and Samuel jerked awake in his chair. He had dozed fitfully through the night, waking every hour to check on the woman. Rex was already up, tail wagging cautiously as he looked toward the bed. The woman's eyes were open. Not the glassy, unfocused stare of delirium, but alert and aware. She was looking directly at Samuel, and though her expression was guarded, the desperate fear from the day before had faded. "You're awake," Samuel said softly, not wanting to startle her. He reached for the water pitcher on the bedside table. "You need to drink." She watched him carefully as he approached, her body tensing as if preparing to flee despite her obvious weakness. When he held the cup to her lips, she hesitated for a moment before drinking eagerly, water running down her chin in her haste. "Slowly," Samuel murmured, pulling the cup back. "Too much at once will make you sick." The woman studied his face as he spoke, and Samuel could see her trying to understand his words. She said something in Apache, her voice hoarse but stronger than the whispered sounds from the night before. Samuel shook his head apologetically. "I'm sorry, I don't understand. Do you speak any English?" She tilted her head, considering, then spoke slowly. "Little English." Her accent was thick, but the words were clear enough. "Good," Samuel said, relief evident in his voice. "My name is Samuel." "Samuel Hayes, this is Rex." He gestured toward the dog, who approached the bed with his tail wagging tentatively. The woman's eyes softened as she looked at Rex. "Dog, find me." "Yes, Rex found you. You were hurt, sick with fever. Do you remember what happened to you?" Pain flickered across her features and she looked away. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Soldiers, they take my people." "I run." Samuel felt his stomach clench. He knew about the recent Apache relocations, the forced marches to reservations hundreds of miles away. The army he had once served was systematically removing native tribes from their ancestral lands, often with brutal efficiency. "How long were you out there alone?" he asked gently. She held up 4 fingers, then seemed to struggle with the English word. 4 sons, 4 days. Samuel marveled that she had survived that long on the open prairie without water or shelter. She must have incredible strength and will to live. Over the next several hours, Samuel coaxed more of her story from her. Her name was Ayana, which she explained meant eternal blossom in her language. She was the daughter of a tribal medicine man, and had been separated from her family during a cavalry raid on their camp. She had managed to escape into the darkness, but had become lost in the vast expanse of prairie land. Doc Peterson arrived late that afternoon, a gruff but kind-hearted man who had been treating ailments on the frontier for over 20 years. He examined Ayana thoroughly, clicking his tongue at her various wounds and checking her fever. "She's lucky to be alive," he told Samuel privately, as they stood on the cabin's front porch. "Another day or 2 out there and she would have died for sure. You did good work cleaning those cuts. No sign of infection." "Will she be all right?" Samuel asked. "Oh, she'll recover just fine, physically speaking." "But Samuel..." Doc Peterson lowered his voice and glanced back toward the cabin. "You know you can't keep her here indefinitely. There's been talk in town about Apache raiders. Folks are on edge. If they find out you're harboring one of them..." Samuel's jaw tightened. "She's not a raider, Doc. She's a victim. Her family was taken by soldiers. I know that and you know that, but try explaining that to the good citizens of Cedar Ridge. They see Apache, they think danger. You'd best figure out what you're going to do with her soon." After Doc Peterson left, Samuel sat on his porch watching the sun set over the prairie. Rex lay at his feet, occasionally glancing back toward the cabin where Ayana rested. Samuel found himself thinking about the doctor's warning. He knew the man was right about the town's attitude toward Native Americans, especially Apaches. But something had stirred in Samuel's heart during the past 2 days. something he had never experienced before. It wasn't just compassion for someone in need, though that was certainly part of it. There was something about Ayanna herself, her quiet dignity, the strength he saw in her dark eyes, the way she had thanked him in her limited English with such genuine gratitude. That evening, as he prepared a simple meal of beans and cornbread, Ayanna surprised him by getting up from the bed. She was unsteady on her feet, but she insisted on helping, gesturing that she wanted to contribute to her own care. "You should rest," Samuel protested, but she shook her head firmly. "I help," she said, taking the wooden spoon from his hand and stirring the pot of beans. They ate together in comfortable silence, sharing the small wooden table Samuel had built himself. Rex positioned himself between their chairs, hoping for scraps. Ayanna smiled for the first time since Samuel had found her, a genuine expression of amusement at the dog's hopeful expression. "Rex, good dog," she said, scratching behind his ears. The collie leaned into her touch, clearly smitten with their houseguest. After dinner, as Samuel banked the fire for the night, Ayanna spoke up from where she sat mending a tear in her dress. "Samuel," she said, and he turned to look at her. Why you help me, Apache? You soldier before?" It was a fair question and one Samuel had been asking himself. "I was a soldier, yes, but that doesn't mean I agreed with everything the army did. You needed help. That's all that mattered." She studied his face in the flickering firelight as if trying to read something in his features. "You good man," she said finally. Samuel felt something shift inside his chest at her words, a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire in the hearth. He was beginning to realize that finding Ayanna might have changed his life in ways he was only starting to understand. 2 weeks passed and Ayanna grew stronger each day. Her wounds healed cleanly, leaving only faint scars, and her fever had long since broken. Samuel found himself looking forward to their simple conversations, watching as her English improved with each passing day. She was quick to learn, often asking him to repeat words and practicing them under her breath as she helped with daily tasks around the ranch. Samuel had insisted she take his bed while he slept on a bedroll in the kitchen, but as her strength returned, Ayanna began to protest this arrangement. She had fashioned a more comfortable sleeping area for herself near the fireplace, using extra blankets and a pillow Samuel had brought from town. "This better," she said one evening as she arranged her makeshift bed. "You need real bed. You work hard all day." Their daily routine had settled into something comfortable and natural. Samuel would wake before dawn to tend his cattle, and when he returned for breakfast, Ayanna would have coffee brewing, and often some kind of bread or biscuits ready. She had a natural talent for cooking, even with Samuel's limited supplies and simple cooking methods. In the afternoons, while Samuel worked on ranch repairs or tended to his small vegetable garden, Ayanna would often walk around the property with Rex at her side. The dog had become completely devoted to her, following her everywhere and sleeping at the foot of her bed each night. Samuel noticed that Ayanna always stayed close to the cabin, never venturing far from sight. When he asked her about it one day, she grew quiet and looked toward the distant horizon. "I afraid," she admitted, "soldiers still look for Apache people. Maybe they come here." "They won't hurt you while you're here," Samuel assured her. "This is my land. You're under my protection." She gave him a grateful smile, but Samuel could see that the fear remained. He began to understand the constant tension she carried, the way she would freeze when she heard unexpected sounds, the careful way she observed strangers from a distance when supply wagons or neighboring ranchers passed by. One afternoon, Samuel was surprised to find Ayanna sitting by the creek that ran behind his property, weaving something from the long grass that grew along the water's edge. Rex sat beside her, watching her nimble fingers work. "What are you making?" Samuel asked, settling down on a fallen log nearby. "Basket," Ayanna replied without looking up from her work. "My grandmother teach me. We use for gathering seeds, berries." Samuel watched her work, fascinated by the intricate pattern emerging from what had looked like simple grass. Her movements were sure and practiced, and he could see that basket making was something deeply ingrained in her culture and family traditions. "Will you teach me?" he asked impulsively. Ayanna looked up in surprise, then smiled. "You want learn Apache way?" "I'd like to learn your way," Samuel corrected gently. For the next hour, Ayanna patiently showed Samuel how to prepare the grass, how to start the base of the basket, and the basic weaving technique. His large, work-calloused hands were clumsy at first, and his attempts looked nothing like her neat, even weaves. But Ayanna was encouraging, guiding his hands and praising his small improvements. "Good," she said as Samuel managed to complete one section without major mistakes. "You learn quick for white man." There was teasing in her voice, and Samuel found himself laughing. It struck him that he had been laughing more in the past 2 weeks than he had in the previous 2 years of solitary living. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Ayanna began telling Samuel about her family. Her father, she explained, was not just a medicine man but also a keeper of stories and traditions. Her mother had been known throughout their band for her skill at beadwork and hide preparation. "I have brother too," Ayanna said, her voice growing sad. "Younger. His name Nalnish means he works hard. Last time I see him, soldiers taking everyone to wagons. I not know if he's still alive." Samuel felt his heart clench at the pain in her voice. He had heard stories about the conditions on some of the reservations, the inadequate food and shelter, the diseases that spread quickly in overcrowded conditions. "Maybe he's all right," Samuel offered, though he wasn't sure he believed it himself. "Apache people are strong. Your brother sounds strong too." Ayanna nodded, but tears glistened in her eyes. "I pray to spirits he's safe. I pray for all my people." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, Rex stretched out between their chairs. Samuel found himself studying Ayanna's profile in the fading light, the graceful line of her neck, the way the evening breeze moved her long black hair. He was beginning to realize that his feelings for her were deeper than simple compassion or friendship. "Ayanna," he said finally, "what will you do when you're completely well? Do you have plans?" She turned to look at him, and Samuel saw uncertainty in her dark eyes. "I not know," she admitted. "Cannot go to reservation. Too far, and maybe soldiers there. Cannot stay on Prairie alone. Will die for sure. You could stay here," Samuel said quietly, "if you wanted to." Ayanna stared at him for a long moment. "Why you say this? People in town, they not like Apache woman living with white man. Make trouble for you." Samuel had been thinking about this exact problem for days. Let them talk. This is my land, my ranch. I can have anyone I want living here. "But why?" Ayanna asked. "Why you want me stay?" It was the question Samuel had been avoiding asking himself. But now, looking into her eyes in the gathering twilight, he knew the answer. "Because I've never been happier than I've been these past 2 weeks. Because Rex has adopted you completely and I trust his judgment. Because you make this place feel like a home instead of just a house," he paused, then added more softly, "Because I think I'm falling in love with you." Ayanna's eyes widened, and for a moment she said nothing. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "In my tribe, there are signs when spirits choose people for each other. Dreams, visions from medicine men. My grandmother, she had gift to see these things." She looked down at her hands. "Before soldiers came, she'd tell me white dog would bring me to man meant to be my husband." I think she was crazy old woman telling stories. Samuel's breath caught. "Rex is white. Mostly white anyway." "Yes," Ayanna said, meeting his eyes again. "And he find me. Bring me to good man who saved my life." They looked at each other in the growing darkness, both understanding that something profound was happening between them, something that went beyond the circumstances that had brought them together. Rex chose that moment to stretch and yawn loudly, breaking the tension and making both Samuel and Ayanna laugh softly. "Smart dog," Ayanna murmured, reaching down to scratch Rex's ears. "Very smart dog." The trouble Samuel had been dreading arrived on a hot Tuesday morning in the form of Sheriff Tom Bradley and 2 of his deputies. Samuel was mending fence when he saw them riding up the dusty trail to his ranch, their badges glinting in the morning sun. Rex began barking a warning, and Samuel saw Ayanna quickly disappear into the cabin. "Morning, Samuel," Sheriff Bradley called out as he dismounted. He was a fair man, Samuel knew, but he also answered to the people of Cedar Ridge, and those people had been growing increasingly nervous about Apache raids reported in neighboring counties. "Tom." Samuel nodded, setting down his hammer and wire cutters. "What brings you out this way?" "Had some reports from town," the sheriff said, removing his hat to wipe the sweat from his forehead. "Folks saying you've got an Apache woman living out here with you." "Now I know that sounds far-fetched, but I had to come check it out myself." Samuel met the sheriff's gaze steadily. "What if I do?" Bradley's expression grew serious. "Samuel, you know I've got nothing against you personally. You served your country, you're a good man. But if you're harboring an Apache, Especially with all the tension lately, it's going to cause problems. Big problems. She's not a raider, Tom, she's a refugee. Her family was taken by the army, and she got separated during the roundup. She was dying when I found her. That may be true, Bradley said, but it doesn't change the fact that folks in town are scared. There was another raid just last week over in Millerville. 3 families dead. People are demanding that all Apaches be rounded up and sent to the reservations where they belong. Samuel felt anger rising in his chest. And what about the families that were murdered by soldiers during those same roundups? Where's the justice for them? That's not my concern, Bradley said firmly. My job is to keep the peace and protect the citizens of this county. If you've got an Apache woman here, I need to see her. Samuel hesitated, knowing that Ayanna was probably listening from inside the cabin. He also knew that if he refused to cooperate, the sheriff would just come back with more men and a warrant. Ayanna, he called toward the cabin. It's all right. Come on out. The cabin door opened slowly and Ayanna emerged. She had changed from her everyday dress into her traditional Apache clothing, perhaps wanting to face this confrontation as herself, rather than trying to hide who she was. Her chin was held high with dignity, but Samuel could see the fear in her eyes. The deputies' hands moved instinctively toward their weapons, and Samuel stepped protectively in front of Ayanna. Easy, Sheriff Bradley warned his men. Nobody's reaching for anything. He studied Ayanna carefully. Miss, I need to ask you some questions. Ayanna looked at Samuel, who nodded encouragingly. I speak little English, she said carefully. Are you Apache? Bradley asked. Yes. Were you involved in any raids on white settlements? Ayanna's eyes flashed with anger. No, my people, they take by soldiers. I run, I no hurt nobody. Bradley seemed to consider this, then turned back to Samuel. Samuel, I believe you found this woman in distress, and I believe you helped her out of the goodness of your heart. But she can't stay here. I've got orders to bring in any Apache not already on a reservation. Orders from who? Samuel demanded. Territorial governor. Military's been pressing for complete removal of all Apache from the territory. No exceptions. Samuel felt his world tilting. He had known this moment might come, but he hadn't realized how much it would feel like someone was tearing his heart out. Where will you take her? There's a transport leaving for the San Carlos reservation next week. She'll go with them. Ayanna stepped forward, her voice stronger now despite her limited English. San Carlos reservation far, maybe 100 miles. My people not there. My family taken different place. That's not my decision to make, Bradley said, though Samuel could see he didn't like the situation any more than they did. Look, Samuel, you've got until Friday to say your goodbyes. Then I have to come back and collect her. After the sheriff and his deputies left, Samuel and Ayanna sat on the porch steps in stunned silence. Rex sensed their distress and whined softly, pressing against their legs. I'd not go to San Carlos, Ayanna said finally. Better to die on Prairie than live in that place. Samuel had heard stories about San Carlos, the overcrowded conditions, the poor food, the diseases that spread quickly through the population. It was essentially a prison camp, and he couldn't bear the thought of Ayanna trapped there. We'll figure something out, he said, taking her hand in his. There has to be another way. That night, as they lay in their separate beds, both staring at the ceiling and unable to sleep, Samuel made a decision that would change both their lives forever. Ayanna, he called softly into the darkness. Yes? Marry me. There was a long silence, then he heard her sit up. What you say? Samuel got up and moved to where he could see her in the faint moonlight coming through the window. Marry me. If you're my wife, legally married, they can't force you onto a reservation. You'd be a citizen protected by law. Ayanna stared at him. You want marry me so I not have to go San Carlos? That's part of it, Samuel admitted, but not the only reason. I love you, Ayanna. These past few weeks have been the happiest of my life. I can't imagine going back to living alone, getting up every morning without seeing your face, having dinner without hearing about your day. But people in town, they hate me. Make life hard for you. Some will, Samuel acknowledged, but others will come around when they see that you're no threat to anyone. And honestly, I don't much care what people think. I care about you. Ayanna was quiet for a long time, and Samuel began to worry that he had moved too fast. Asked too much, my grandmother, she said finally. She tell me white dog bring me to man meant to be husband. She also say I know in my heart when spirits give blessing. She looked at Samuel in the moonlight. My heart say yes. But you sure? Marriage forever. No take back, I'm sure, Samuel said without hesitation. The question is, are you sure? I know this isn't how you imagined getting married, with sheriffs and laws and politics involved. Ayanna smiled, the first genuine smile he had seen from her since the sheriff's visit. Apache women, we strong. We marry men who strong too, who protect family. You protect me even when dangerous for you. You good man, Samuel Hayes. I think spirits choose well. Samuel felt a weight lift from his chest. So that's a yes? That is yes, Ayanna said, reaching out to take his hand. I marry you. Rex, who had been sleeping between their beds, suddenly stood up and wagged his tail, as if he understood and approved of what had just happened. Even Rex agrees, Samuel said, laughing softly. Rex smart dog, Ayanna agreed. He no good match when he see it. They spent the rest of the night talking quietly about their plans, about the kind of life they wanted to build together, about the challenges they would face and how they would overcome them. By the time the sun rose, Samuel felt more certain than ever that finding Ayanna had been the best thing that had ever happened to him. Now all they had to do was convince a territorial judge to marry an Apache woman to a white rancher before the sheriff came back to take her away. Getting a judge to perform the marriage ceremony proved more challenging than Samuel had anticipated. Judge Morrison, the only judge within 50 miles, initially refused outright when Samuel explained the situation. Son, I understand you want to help this woman, the elderly judge said from behind his cluttered desk in the courthouse. But marriage is a sacred institution. You can't just marry someone to circumvent the law. With respect, Your Honor, Samuel replied. I'm not trying to circumvent anything. I love Ayanna and she loves me. The timing might be complicated, but the feelings are real. Judge Morrison studied Samuel's face carefully. You've known this woman for what, 3 weeks? That's hardly enough time to build a lasting relationship. Sometimes you just know, Samuel said quietly. I've been alone for 8 years, Judge. I thought I was content with that life. Then Ayanna came along and everything changed. I can't imagine my life without her now. The judge was quiet for a long moment, tapping his pen against his desk. There's another problem, Samuel. Even if I believed your feelings were genuine, there are territorial laws about marriages between whites and Indians. Some folks consider such unions illegal. Samuel felt his heart sink. What do you mean? I mean the territorial legislature has been debating laws that would prohibit interracial marriages. Haven't passed anything yet, but the sentiment is there. If I perform this ceremony, I could be risking my position. But until such a law passes, there's nothing preventing it, right? Samuel pressed. Judge Morrison sighed heavily. Technically, no. But Samuel, even if I marry you two, life isn't going to be easy. You'll face prejudice, discrimination. Your children, if you have any, will face even worse. We'll deal with whatever comes, Samuel said firmly. But we need to deal with it together. The judge studied him for another long moment, then shook his head with a wry smile. You know, I married my wife after knowing her for exactly 2 weeks. Her father thought I was crazy. That was 37 years ago. He reached for his calendar. All right, Samuel. Bring your lady here tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. But I want to talk to her myself. Make sure she understands what she's getting into. Samuel rode home with his heart pounding, hope and anxiety warring in his chest. When he told Ayanna about the judge's agreement, she was quiet for a long time. He want to make sure I'm not forced into marriage, she said finally. This good. Apache women choose own husbands. No man force us. The next morning, Ayanna dressed carefully in a combination of her traditional Apache dress and some jewelry that Samuel's mother had left him. The result was striking. A beautiful blend of two cultures that somehow seemed to honor both. Judge Morrison questioned Ayanna for nearly an hour, asking about her understanding of marriage, her feelings for Samuel, and her awareness of the challenges they would face. Despite her limited English, Ayanna answered every question with quiet dignity and obvious sincerity. Young woman, the judge said finally, do you understand that once you marry Samuel, there will be people who treat you badly because of your heritage? Yes, Ayanna replied, but there also be good people, like Samuel, like Doctor who helped me, like you, who give us chance when you not have to. Judge Morrison smiled at that. Fair enough. Samuel, do you have rings? Samuel produced a simple gold band that had belonged to his mother. For himself, he had fashioned a ring from silver, decorated with small turquoise stones that Ayanna had found by the creek, and taught him how to polish. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. Besides the judge and his clerk, the only other witnesses were Doc Peterson, who had insisted on being there, and Mrs. Elena Martinez, the judge's housekeeper, who had quietly supported the marriage when she learned about their situation. When Judge Morrison pronounced them husband and wife, Samuel felt as if his whole world had shifted into place. Ayanna's eyes were bright with tears as he kissed her, and even Rex, who had been surprisingly well behaved during the ceremony, wagged his tail as if he understood the significance of what had just happened. "Well," Doc Peterson said afterward, shaking Samuel's hand, "you've gone and done it now. Mrs. Hayes, welcome to the family." "Mrs. Hayes," Ayanna repeated softly as if testing how the name sounded. "I like this name." They celebrated that evening with a simple dinner at the ranch. Samuel had ridden into town and bought supplies for a special meal, including a small cake from the bakery. Mrs. Martinez had given Ayanna a beautiful shawl as a wedding gift, and Doc Peterson had brought a bottle of good whiskey. As they sat around the small table sharing food and stories, Samuel realized that this was exactly what he had always wanted, but had never been able to imagine. A real family gathered around his table, Rex contentedly lying by the fire, his wife, sitting beside him with that gentle smile he had come to love. "Samuel," Ayanna said as they cleaned up after dinner. "In Apache tradition, when women marry, she bring gifts to husband's family. I have nothing to give." "You've given me everything," Samuel replied, taking her hands in his. "You've given me a reason to wake up happy every morning. You've made this house into a home. You've shown me what love really means." "But I want give something Apache way too," Ayanna insisted. She went to her bundle of belongings and pulled out a small leather pouch. "This is sacred herbs from my homeland. For protection, for blessing on our marriage. My grandmother give to me before." She didn't finish the sentence, but Samuel understood. That night, as they lay in their marriage bed, Ayanna told Samuel about Apache marriage customs, about the ceremonies and traditions of her people. Samuel shared stories about his own family, his parents who had died when he was young, his dreams for their ranch and their future together. "Are you scared?" Samuel asked as they listened to the night sounds of the prairie outside their window. "Little bit," Ayanna admitted, "but not of you, not of being married. I'm scared of what other people do when they find out." "Sheriff Bradley will be here Friday," Samuel said. "We'll show him the marriage certificate. Legally, you're a citizen now. He can't touch you. And if he try anyway?" Samuel's arm tightened around her. "Then he'll have to go through me first." Ayanna was quiet for a moment, then she spoke softly in Apache before translating. "I say prayer to spirits, thank them for bringing me to good man. Thank them for white dog who saved my life." Rex, hearing his name mentioned, lifted his head from his spot by the door and wagged his tail sleepily. "Thank you, Rex," Samuel said solemnly to the dog, "for finding the woman who was meant to be my wife." As they drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, both Samuel and Ayanna felt a sense of peace despite the challenges they knew lay ahead. They had found each other against impossible odds, had married despite opposition, and had created something beautiful from circumstances that could have ended in tragedy. Outside, the prairie wind whispered through the grass, carrying their dreams toward the stars above. Rex settled more comfortably by the door, content in his role as guardian of this new family he had helped bring together. The next morning would bring its own challenges, but for now they were simply husband and wife, beginning their life together in the small cabin that had become their sanctuary. The marriage certificate lay safely tucked away in Samuel's strongbox, proof that their love had triumphed over fear and prejudice, at least for now. When morning came, they would face Sheriff Bradley together, armed with the law and their unshakable commitment to each other. Whatever happened next, they would meet it as a united family, the rancher, his Apache bride, and the wise dog who had made it all possible. Friday morning arrived gray and overcast with storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Samuel and Ayanna sat on their porch waiting for Sheriff Bradley's arrival. The marriage certificate was folded carefully in Samuel's shirt pocket, and Rex lay alert at their feet, sensing the tension in the air. They didn't have to wait long. 3 riders approached the ranch just after 9 o'clock, but it wasn't just Sheriff Bradley and his deputies this time. A 4th man rode with them, wearing a military uniform that Samuel recognized as belonging to a cavalry captain. "That's not good," Samuel murmured. standing as the men dismounted. "Morning, Samuel," Sheriff Bradley called out, his voice more formal than usual. "This is Captain William Morrison from Fort Apache. He's here on official military business." Samuel nodded to the captain, noting the man's hard expression and the way his hand rested casually near his sidearm. "Captain?" "Mr. Hayes," Captain Morrison replied curtly. "I understand you've been harboring an escaped Apache. I'm here to collect her and return her to military custody." "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding," Samuel said, reaching into his pocket for the marriage certificate. "Ayanna is my wife. We were married 3 days ago by Judge Morrison." He handed the document to Sheriff Bradley, who examined it carefully before passing it to the captain. Captain Morrison's face darkened as he read. "This changes nothing," the captain said, crushing the certificate in his fist. "Apache prisoners of war cannot enter into legal marriages without military permission. This document is meaningless." Samuel felt his blood run cold. Prisoners of war? Ayanna committed no crime. Her family was rounded up during a relocation. All Apache are considered enemy combatants until proven otherwise. Captain Morrison replied, "This woman will come with us now, or we'll arrest you for interfering with military operations." Ayanna stood slowly, her chin raised with quiet dignity. "I go," she said simply. "No want Samuel hurt because of me." "No," Samuel said firmly, stepping in front of her. "You're my wife. You're not going anywhere." Captain Morrison's hand moved to his weapon. "Stand aside, Mr. Hayes. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." "How about we all calm down a moment?" Sheriff Bradley intervened, clearly uncomfortable with how the situation was escalating. "Captain, maybe we could work something out here. These folks are legally married according to territorial law. Military law supersedes territorial law in matters of Indian affairs," Captain Morrison snapped. "I have my orders." Samuel's mind raced, looking for any option that wouldn't end with Ayanna being dragged away or himself being shot. Then he remembered something from his army days. "Captain," he said carefully, "what's your full name and unit?" "Captain William Morrison, 3rd Cavalry Regiment." "Why?" Samuel felt a spark of hope. "Any relation to Judge Morrison?" The captain's expression flickered slightly. "He's my uncle." "Again, why?" "Because your uncle performed our marriage ceremony. He believed it was legal and binding." "Are you saying Judge Morrison doesn't understand territorial law?" Captain Morrison's jaw tightened. He was clearly caught between his orders and his family relationship. "My uncle's personal opinions don't change military policy." "Maybe not," Samuel said, "but they might be worth considering. Your uncle spoke with Ayanna extensively before agreeing to marry us. He was convinced she posed no threat to anyone." During this exchange, Ayanna had been quietly observing the captain. Suddenly she stepped forward and spoke directly to him in fluent English, her accent barely noticeable. "Captain Morrison, you have duty to follow orders. I understand this. But you also have duty to justice. I am not your enemy. I never raised weapon against white people. I never took part in raids. I was daughter of medicine man, healer of my people. When soldiers came to take my family, I run because I afraid. This make me criminal?" Captain Morrison stared at her, clearly surprised by her articulate speech and dignified bearing. "You speak English very well for an Apache. My father believed Apache people must learn white man's ways to survive. He sent me to mission school for 2 years when I was child. I learned to read, write, speak English. I also learn about white man's God, white man's laws. I know white people not all bad, just like Apache people not all bad." The captain seemed to wrestle with himself for a moment. "Even if that's true, I have orders to bring in all Apache not already on reservations." "Then take me," Ayanna said quietly. "But know that you take innocent woman from husband who love her. Know that you break law that your own uncle say is good law." Sheriff Bradley stepped forward. "Captain, if I may suggest something, why don't we ride back to town and discuss this with Judge Morrison? Let him explain the legal situation. If the marriage is valid under territorial law, and if Mrs. Hayes here poses no threat to public safety, maybe we can find a solution that satisfies everyone." Samuel could see the captain struggling with the situation. This clearly wasn't what he had expected when he rode out to collect a simple Apache prisoner. "I have orders," Captain Morrison repeated, but his voice lacked conviction. "Orders can be interpreted," Sheriff Bradley said diplomatically. "Your commanding officer probably assumed you'd be dealing with a hostile prisoner, not a married woman with legal documentation." Rex chose that moment to stand up and walk over to Captain Morrison. sitting down directly in front of him and looking up with intelligent brown eyes. The dog's calm presence seemed to diffuse some of the tension in the air. "Smart dog," one of the deputies commented. "Knows a good judge of character when he sees one." Captain Morrison looked down at Rex, then at Ayanna, then at the crumpled marriage certificate in his hand. Samuel held his breath, knowing that the next few moments would determine their entire future. "Against my better judgment," the captain said finally, "I'm going to give you 24 hours. I'll speak with Judge Morrison and telegraph my commanding officer for clarification. But if I don't get satisfactory answers, I'll be back tomorrow with a full squadron." "That's fair," Samuel said, relief flooding through him. "Don't make me regret this decision," Captain Morrison warned as he remounted his horse. "And don't even think about running. If you're not here tomorrow, I'll track you down and arrest you both." After the men rode away, Samuel and Ayanna sat back down on their porch steps, emotionally exhausted. Rex positioned himself between them as if standing guard. "You think Judge convince him?" Ayanna asked. "I hope so," Samuel replied. "Your uncle seems like a reasonable man, and Judge Morrison has a way of making people see sense. And if not?" Samuel took her hand in his. "Then we'll face whatever comes next together. I meant what I said when I married you, for better or worse, in good times and bad." Ayanna squeezed his hand. Apache sang, "Strong wind cannot break tree with deep roots." "We have deep roots now, Samuel. Our love, our marriage, our life together. Whatever wind come, it not break us." As they sat watching the storm clouds gather overhead, both Samuel and Ayanna knew that the next 24 hours would test everything they had built together. But they also knew that they had already overcome impossible odds to find each other, and their love had only grown stronger through each challenge they had faced. Rex settled his head on Samuel's boot, content to stand guard over his family as they waited to see what tomorrow would bring. The storm that had been threatening all day finally broke just after sunset, sending Samuel and Ayanna rushing to secure the animals and bring in the laundry from the line. As they worked together in the driving rain, Samuel couldn't help but notice how naturally they moved as a team, anticipating each other's needs without having to speak. They spent the evening by the fire, trying to read or work on small projects, but both found it impossible to concentrate. Every sound outside made them look up, wondering if Captain Morrison was returning early with his decision. "I keep thinking about your grandmother's vision," Samuel said as they prepared for bed. "About the white dog bringing you to your destined husband. Do you think she saw all of this, the struggles we'd face?" Ayanna considered this as she braided her hair for the night. "Grandmother always say visions show what will be, not how it happened. She see me married to good man, living happy life. She not see soldiers fear fighting. Maybe spirits know we strong enough to get through hard parts." They lay awake for a long time that night, holding each other and listening to the rain on the roof. Rex had positioned himself by the window, occasionally lifting his head to peer out into the darkness. Morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having washed the air clean. Samuel was feeding the chickens when he saw riders approaching. The same group as yesterday, but moving at a more leisurely pace. His heart hammered as he called for Ayanna. Captain Morrison dismounted with a much different expression than he had worn the day before. If Samuel didn't know better, he might have said the man looked almost pleased. "Mr. and Mrs. Hayes," the captain began formally. Then his expression softened slightly. "I had a long conversation with my uncle yesterday, followed by an even longer telegraph exchange with my commanding officer." Samuel and Ayanna stood close together, her hand tucked into the crook of his arm. "Judge Morrison made a compelling case for the legality of your marriage," Captain Morrison continued. "He also shared his personal observations about Mrs. Hayes's character and intelligence. Furthermore, he reminded me that my job is to apprehend dangerous Apache raiders, not to break up legal marriages between peaceful citizens." Samuel felt his heart begin to hope, but he waited for the captain to continue. "My commanding officer agrees that this situation falls outside our normal protocols. Mrs. Hayes, you are free to remain here with your husband, provided you report to the territorial authorities once monthly for the next year. This is simply a formality to ensure you remain in the area and continue to pose no threat to local settlers." Ayanna stepped forward, dignity radiating from her small frame. "Captain Morrison, I give you my word as daughter of Medicine Man and as wife of Samuel Hayes. I will never raise hand against peaceful people. I will follow your reporting requirements. And I thank you for wisdom and fairness. Captain Morrison actually smiled at that. You remind me of my own wife, Mrs. Hayes. She has that same ability to make a man feel like he's done the right thing even when he wasn't sure himself. Sheriff Bradley stepped forward to shake Samuel's hand. Well, looks like we got this all sorted out without anybody getting shot or arrested. I call that a successful day. After the officials left, Samuel and Ayanna stood in their yard, hardly able to believe that the crisis had passed. Rex ran in circles around them, clearly sensing their joy and relief. We did it, Samuel said, lifting Ayanna off her feet and spinning her around. We're really and truly married, and nobody can take you away from me. White dog bring me to husband? Ayanna laughed as Samuel set her down. Grandmother right about everything. That afternoon, they had an unexpected visitor, Mrs. Elena Martinez. Judge Morrison's housekeeper, who had witnessed their wedding, arrived in a small wagon loaded with supplies. Wedding gifts, she announced as she began unloading bundles. From people in town who think you two deserve a proper start to married life. Samuel and Ayanna exchanged surprised looks. People in town? Samuel asked. More than you might think, Mrs. Martinez replied with a knowing smile. Doc Peterson told everybody about how you saved this young woman's life. Mrs. Kelly at the general store said any man that kind deserves happiness. And Father O'Brien said love is love no matter what color people's skin is. The gifts were simple but heartfelt. Kitchen supplies, fabric for new clothes, a beautiful quilt made by the ladies' church circle, preserves and pickled vegetables, even some flower seeds for Ayanna to plant a garden. Thank you, Ayanna said, tears in her eyes. I not expect this kindness. Honey, Mrs. Martinez said, patting Ayanna's hand. Most folks are decent when you get right down to it. They just need time to see past their fears to the person underneath. Over the following months, Samuel and Ayanna settled into married life with a contentment that surprised them both. Ayanna's monthly reports to the territorial authorities became routine visits to town, where she gradually began to make friends among the more open-minded residents. Her skill with herbal medicine, learned from her father, proved invaluable to the community. When Doc Peterson was called away to treat victims of a mining accident, Ayanna stepped in to help with various ailments, earning the gratitude and respect of many families. Samuel expanded his ranch operations, and Ayanna proved to be not only a loving wife, but also a capable partner in running their business. Her knowledge of the land and its natural resources helped them find the best pastures for their cattle and identify valuable medicinal plants they could harvest and sell. One evening in late fall, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, Ayanna placed Samuel's hand on her still flat belly. Samuel, she said softly, we going to have baby. Samuel's eyes widened, then filled with tears of joy. Really, you're sure? Apache women know these things, Ayanna said with a gentle smile. Baby come in spring. Grandmother always say babies born in spring are blessed by earth spirits. Rex, now graying around the muzzle but still devoted to his family, seemed to sense the significance of the moment. He moved closer to Ayanna and rested his head on her lap, as if offering his protection to the new life growing within her. Boy or girl? This child is going to be loved by so many people, Samuel said, wrapping his arms around his wife. And Rex will teach him or her everything about being loyal and brave and smart. And stubborn, Ayanna added with a laugh. Rex very stubborn dog. As winter settled over the prairie, Samuel often found himself marveling at how completely his life had changed. A year ago, he had been a lonely man going through the motions of living. Now he was a husband expecting his first child, accepted by his community, building a future filled with love and purpose. It had all started with Rex's barking on that blazing hot day when they found a dying Apache woman by a dried creek bed. Samuel had thought he was simply saving a life, but as Ayanna's grandmother had foreseen, Rex had led him to his destiny. On quiet evenings by the fire, with Ayanna sewing baby clothes and Rex sleeping contentedly at their feet, Samuel would sometimes shake his head in wonder at the mysterious ways life could unfold. He had learned that love could triumph over fear, that kindness could overcome prejudice, and that sometimes the most important moments in life came disguised as ordinary acts of compassion. Their first child was born on a warm April morning, a healthy daughter with her mother's dark eyes and her father's stubborn chin. They named her Hope Elena, honoring both their dreams for the future and Mrs. Martinez, who had become like a mother to Ayanna. Rex appointed himself the baby's guardian from the moment she arrived, sleeping beside her cradle and alerting her parents to her every need. As Hope grew, she would often be found toddling around the ranch with the faithful collie beside her, the wise dog who had brought her parents together still watching over the family he had helped create. Years later, when Hope was old enough to understand, Samuel and Ayanna would tell her the story of how they met, how a dog's keen instincts and a rancher's compassionate heart had brought together two people from different worlds to create something beautiful and lasting. And Hope would always end the story the same way, scratching Rex behind his gray ears and saying, "A good dog, Rex, very good dog."